there, welcome back to another video. This is my last one of the week, and this is a specialist one. This is about James Gunn, but I'm avoiding his big budget films like Suicide Squad, The Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. Avoiding them, but I'm covering the low budget ones. So it's Slither, it's Super, and two low budget films he produced was Belko Experiment and Brightburn. I thought I'd cover them too, but the main ones is Slither and Super. Now, James Gunn started out in Trauma, as a writer for Trauma and Juliet, and then he went up to big budget films like Dawn of the Dead remake, the Scooby-Doo movies. He was just an in-demand writer because he had a slightly different point of view, a slightly different cheeky attitude, a little bit subversive. Something there was, something he didn't, but he kind of started going to becoming a director at a certain point because, it's a protection, because if you write Scooby-Doo movies, it's not going to do your ego much good eventually. Eventually you want to go into cover yourself and help yourself and be your own person. So he started off with Slither, which was a low budget film, or lowest budget. It wasn't like really low budget because he had successes, so he had some budget. But the film didn't do very well. And then went to Super, which was a really low budget, and then Marvel called. But Slither is the first one. Slither is a perfect sign of what he was going to become, what he would be as a director. Because it is a kind of monster movie. It's a monster movie, but it's very kind of unconventional in its own way. Because it's a character... a lot of James Gunn stuff are character-based in genre. And this is a character-based film. And it's a big thing, difference you see between the films he directs and the films he produces. And that he's much better as a director on his character-based stuff. And once he produces, he's with other directors, and I don't think some are better than others. The best way to put it. But in Slither, it's about these monsters from outer space that come in and infect people and turn them into monsters. The monsters go all over the town and stuff like that. It's basically Nightly Creeps in some way. Because again, you've got slithery monsters, and they also look like the monsters from Shivers, which is a Cronenberg film, with a very similar title, was obviously intentional. And these monsters come here and infect people, and it turns certain people into be infected and create these other monsters because you can't stop eating as soon as you get infected. And then into your body, these other monsters are born, and they spread that way. And the first person infected is played by Michael Rooker. And he's married to Elizabeth Banks, and they're both unhappily married couple. They're trying, but he's much older. He helped her she was poor to start with. He married and got her out of poverty, so she feels like she owes him something. Even though she's really into Nathan Fillion's character, who's the local sheriff. So that's the kind of setup, that's the kind of triangle we've got for the film. But the first third of the movie is about the marriage. Nathan Fillion doesn't really turn up as a major force till the third way mark. The first third is really their marriage problems, him getting infected, the marriage becoming problematic, and then as things get worse, as infection spreads, Nathan Fillion as the sheriff has to get involved, and it becomes a chase movie as more and more people get infected in the town. And it's not just the nasty people get infected, a lot of decent people get infected as well. It's James Gunn does not care about killing off people who you like. He seems to really enjoy it. As just any of his movies, he has no sentimentality. So it's really about her going from her husband to him, and then in the guise of a monster movie. She's going from her husband to the sheriff. That's basically the story. It's her going from one person to the other, and his bad reaction to tragedy is to almost destroy the town. It's almost like a metaphor for their situation done as a sci-fi movie. Instead of her just leaving him to go to be with the person she likes, and him being going a temper tantrum. It's he goes ape shit because he's infected and he almost destroys the town. And you have lots and lots of scenes of them trying to figure out what's going on, all these typical things. But you've got the mayor, who's just horrible. So Greg Henry, who's just the most terrible person in the world. And the film was a lot of fun with how horrible it is. You've got the various sheriff's assistants who are not the most competent people because they're just in a job that does not require them to be that competent usually. Because you're just dealing with people who have very minor problems usually. So you've got all these issues going on amidst this monster movie, and also you have a lot of these set pieces going on. Like there's one point where the family house is attacked, and the whole family gets infected apart from the eldest daughter, who starts off in the bath, has to escape from the bath, go through the house, escape from the house, and then run into the cops and try and get escape with them. There's stuff like that going on, but it all is a metaphor for this marriage falling apart. That's what it's about. You can feel it through the film, and that's what gives it its base. So even though it's a fun monster movie with all these set pieces in it, there is a base in the marriage story that always gives it a kind of emotional reality. Like, he doesn't, like the Michael Rooker character does not want to be a monster. He's trying his best not to be a monster, but he's just been infected, so he is. It's obviously he's trying to find his own nature because he does have aspirations to be better than what he feels he is. And that's sympathetic. You actually do feel for him, even as he becomes more and more monstrous. You know, and you like the couple, and you like the characters, some of whom die. So it's a very good debut. It's very unpretentious. It knows what it is. It's a monster movie with an emotional subtext. And it's one of those films like Tremors or Arachnophobia where it's like, this is a good example of how you do a monster movie. This is how you do a monster movie. You make the characters good, you kill a few of them off to make sure you know that they mean business, but you have an emotional undertow. You have something there that people can grab onto. So this is a perfectly good film that did not do well. It should have done well, it never. It's just bad luck. So obviously he was in movie jail after that. He couldn't get anything going. But then he had an old script called Super that his ex-wife is in the office and she gave it to Rainn Wilson because she liked the script and she said she should do this. And so Rainn Wilson said yes, he'd do it because he was in the office and he's big then. So they got a low budget to make this film Super. This is my favourite of the James Gunn's low budget films. You know, it might be my favourite of his films overall. I'm not quite sure, but it's definitely up there because it's especially the rewatch I did recently for this video, it really struck me as how good it was. Because it is taking the aesthetic of a low budget trauma film. It's like, there's no budget, everything's shot in natural light, everything, you've got all these people in funny costumes, and like, the backgrounds are all like, very typical locations that they obviously just had a location and shot the stuff rather than try to build a set. Which makes everything look ridiculous but funny because you're just seeing the people being really into what they're doing. And the reality saying, no, this doesn't work in this life. This is just not right. And that juxtaposition just really works. Because it's about a guy who's a chef, played by Rainn Wilson, who's a very good chef, but he's a bit of a loser. And his wife, who he brought out of a drug addiction, leaves him because she falls back off the wagon. And instead of taking it, he goes a bit mad. He gets really mental. And he tries to become a superhero. So it's weird because this film and St. Maud, which I just covered in another video, are almost like mirror images of each other. This is like the male version of madness, and St. Maud's like the female version of madness. But it is genuine madness. I mean, it is one of those things where at the end of it, he's like, what did I do? Oh God. This is really stupid. This idea is people want to be superheroes, but you actually do it, it's a really stupid idea. And this is the one film where actually was like, this is dumb. Because he really gets into it. And he ends up, his weapon is basically a big club thing, just whacking people with a spanner, really. It's not a spanner, but it's one of those mechanical things, just whacks people with it. And he's all in red, he's dressed in red, he runs out, he sits behind dumpsters a lot, waiting for crime to happen. He's not doing an investigation, he's just waiting for crime to happen. And he starts out against drug dealers and ends up going against people cutting line the movies and stuff, and it's just insane. So he gets an assistant who's this geeky comic shop assistant played by Elliot Page. Ellen then, now Elliot. And this assistant, she's mad. She's crazy. Just crazy eyes from the start. And she wants to be his boy wonder, basically. And there's obviously a sexual element here, which they really play up, even though he's really into his wife still. And his whole justifications of all about his wife. And it just becomes this story about this weird relationship. Half of it's in his head because he's really into his wife. And his view of that relationship is completely biased and completely insane and in no way accurate to the reality. You know, she was going to tell me go away. So, it's the story of him trying to get her back when that's a doomed thing. It's a male romantic delusion syndrome at its most extreme, but also taking place in the real world where no one cares what this kind of stuff is. Like, why are you trying to be a superhero? This makes no sense. And the real world's tough enough. Why are you been so delusional and hurt yourself so badly? It becomes this story of a guy who can't take rejection. And it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. And it just goes full on to the stupidity of what he's doing by having him in this costume, having him hate himself. He hates his stupid brain. He gets into religious superhero moralistic comics and stuff like that as well, because he wants to feel good about what he's doing even though it's nonsense. It's really violent. It's places. Again, James Gunn, he's not sentimental about killing people off in a horrible way. And it's wonderful. And the end's terrific because they actually figure out an ending that actually makes sense for everybody that survives. And there is a point, and it's just a wonderful little film. But it's not for everybody. Like, at all. But this is the film. I'm not sure if there's this a Slither or what got him Guardians of the Galaxy, but obviously someone in Marvel thought, this guy's really interesting. Let's put him in something that we're not sure what to do with. And he suddenly became a massive director with Guardians of the Galaxy. And then did Suicide Squad as well. So now he's in a big role. And a lot of the projects he wanted to do before are now getting done. So he managed to get 2 projects off the ground as a producer while he's doing his bigger films. Because he's one of the directors who actually, even his bigger films feel like James Gunn films. They just feel like films on a different budget, but there's still a lot of obsessions in there. It's like Marvel's kind of let him go and say, like, whatever you're doing, it's kind of right for what we need. It's just like one of those things where he found a studio that understood his weirdness. And he's one of those directors. Some directors go to Marvel and they'll lose all their personality. He's one of those ones that went to Marvel and gained a lot because he had a structure for his weirdness and it worked really well for him. And for the audience, he even went to DC when he got fired and before he came back. And even there, they gave him free reign to do a wonderfully weird Suicide Squad movie. So despite his problems, he's managed to actually find his way in the system in an interesting way. People like his stuff. I think as long as he keeps the budgets to a reasonable level, he's probably going to be okay. But he produced 2 films, neither of which did well financially when they were released, but I think they're both so low budget to start with, they probably did well later. One's hit video on demand and DVD and Blu-ray and stuff like that. They're probably all doing fine because they're all really low budgets. The first one's a Belko Experiment, directed by Greg McLean. This one is it's really enjoyable. It really is. It's not the same level as James Gunn, but James Gunn wrote it. It's a bit this company in South America, and the company is there to actually help businesses that are American come into South America and actually have, like, the workers be put to South America to deal with their interests. That's the official business thing they're doing. Of course, that's nonsense. What they're really doing is they're the suckers who are going to be in this experiment. So this building, they've only got one building for this company. This is a big building, it's a bit overpriced. According to them, it was hired out from the government at a cheap price. What it is actually a building that can be sealed off so no one can escape. And they've given orders to kill each other. Kill so many people first, then more and more orders come through, and it's like, what happens when you take a lot of people who think of themselves as good people and then make them kill each other, and so it's a social experiment to see what people are actually like under the skin, under the niceness, under the pretensions of God, of decency to each other, what they're really about. That's what the film really is, what they're really about. And it's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. It's well directed, it's well acted. There's a lot of people you'll know from James Gunn movies, like his brother's in it, Sean Gunn. Michael Rooker's in it. The guy who played Polka Dot Man in Suicide Squad's in it, in a small part. You know, there's John C. McGinley's in it, playing a wonderfully creepy guy. Tony Goldwyn is the main villain in it. He's the CEO of the company who goes really mad because he's an ex-Marine and he's hard to deal with for everybody. So it's a case of the alpha males become pretty dominant pretty quickly, but then other people have to fight back as well in different ways, and it's all about how people fight back and how things evolve and who's the strongest overall and how much a fluke it is of survival. And how even like nice people accidentally kill people by mistake, and it's like, how do you deal with someone you like and you realise I've actually killed someone during this day? There's all this stuff, and you find other people who people like, but they've got a point of view that they don't agree with. There's all that kind of stuff going into it. It's a really well made film, and James Gunn had a chance to direct it, but he didn't want to at that point because it was a bit dark and he just wasn't in that place. So Greg McLean directed it, but he wrote it, and it's a really fun film. That and Mayhem. Mayhem also came out not long after it, which is also people going mad in a building movie. It starred Stephen Yeun and Samara Weaving. It's also a really good film. So two films, the same premise, came out very close together, and both were really fun. There's been other ones of this idea later, but I haven't bothered watching them because it's been done really well. So it's like, the odds are the other ones won't be as good. So that's really a strong film they produced. I think it's getting a cult following now because people think it's time to enjoy it. It came and went, and people thought it was going to be more brutal than it was because it's more a comedy, a dark comedy with some kills. I think people thought it was going to be the most gory film ever, and it wasn't. It was gore in it, but it wasn't really gory. Then we have Brightburn, which is the other film he produced. I think his cousins wrote it, and he brought in a director. And its idea was, what if Superman went bad? What if, the story of Superman, he comes to Earth, a kind of couple find him, take him in, and hide him from the rest of the world and try and bring him up as a good lad. And what happens if at a certain time during puberty he goes bad and thinks, I can take over this world. I don't have to serve, I can take over it. And he's getting signals from the machine that brought him here to tell me that's a good idea. And that's the story. Now, this one was one of those films that everyone loved the idea of, and then the film came out and they were like, that wasn't what I wanted. And so it wasn't well received. And so I never watched it for ages. I only watched it for this video. And I really enjoyed it. It's not amazing. It's probably the weakest of all these films, you know, because the premise is a short story premise. Because you're dealing with what's really the first act of the Superman story. You're extending it, and it's like, what happens if he goes bad, and how long does denial take place? And so it's about parents being the main story. It's sort of like Slither in a way where it's an emotional story of this time being what parents don't understand the child is going evil. And once they understand it, how do they react? How long does it take them to turn and realise they have to protect everyone else from them? Which could be a super child, or it could just be a child who's going psycho. So Elizabeth Banks stars in this one, back from Slither. And it's a really enjoyable film, but it is a very slight film. I mean, there's there's nothing new here. I mean, all the plot points that people point out in this one, why they don't do this, why not go with authority straight away, that's from Superman. It's like, well, why not do that in Superman either? It's just that's just the genre constraints the dudes are showing. And yet it takes them a while to realise he's gone really bad because on denial. And again, what I said a few weeks ago, people seem to expect characters in movies to act the way they think they should act straight away, which would be super logical straight away, rather than being like people who be in denial and be unsure about how to go ahead and make mistakes and do horrible things, and that's the way people are. I think modern audiences expect people to act like saints, which isn't people. It's almost like a disgust at people that a lot of modern audiences seem to have. So this film is about people being weak, people making mistakes, and their mistakes basically lead to this kid learning all of his powers slowly but surely and having the time to learn them, so by the time people realise what's happened, he can kill anybody. Like, he kills the mother of the girl he's a crush on because she calls him crazy. He gets revenge on her by killing her mother, who was nice to him when he was younger. And it's that kind of thing that was crazy. His own father tries to shoot him at one point, and that doesn't go well. There's a whole host of fun scenes, that are fun what-if scenes from basically the Superman mythos. I liked this film. I know I'm in the minority, but I liked it. It is a slight film, but I thought it was well done for what it was. But it did need that kind of weird James Gunn feel, I think. There's certain things in it which would have helped with more eccentricity to the characters, a bit more strange, weird motivations that Gunn's really good at, which I don't think this film had. Which I think is a thing that people wanted from it, but you didn't get. I think if there was more of that in there, just a bit more oddness, it probably would have been more better received. But because it did feel like a short story expanded, I think that's the thing people disliked about it. But I liked it. I thought it was well done for what it was. But it's very enjoyable. So that's the four James Gunn films. 2 early ones, and the 2 films produced, the low budget stuff. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back next week with more videos, but that's me for now. Right, bye.